Hello everyone, welcome to Knowledge India once again. This is episode 1 of the Enterprise Use Case series. What we are going to do in the upcoming videos in this series is we will be picking up different scenarios which enterprise or big organizations face while they are trying to move their workloads to cloud. So we will take different scenarios and we will actually uh, do a discussion type of video. Okay, so we'll take a problem statement and we'll try to analyze different parts of it. We will see that what all options are possible and why are we going to go ahead and take a particular option. Of course, there is no strict right or wrong, right? The way it works is you always need to look at multiple factors, and based on the requirements which are given to you, you should go ahead and architect a solution. So that is what we will go ahead and do. Now, I had published the problem statement already for this particular use case. I'm sure those who are following our channel, you would have already read it and you would have done some work in terms of defining a solution. While we go through this video and you are watching this, you can even relate to what you had thought and how we are presenting it. Okay, so that should give you some perspective. What we are doing in this particular use case is, so there's an organization which has got an a Windows based web application, right? A typical .NET application, ASP.NET based, and it is running on-prem. So of course it would be running on a Windows server. It is and the plan is that they want to move this application to cloud, to AWS. Now, while doing that, they do not want that it should cost them a lot in terms of changing things, um, um, and hence development cost should not increase much. So the customer is okay to do some amount of changes. They basically are requesting the architect to propose a model or to propose a solution which will be which will be a balanced approach between taking all the right advantages or qualities or features from the cloud, but at the same time not changing a lot, in the existing application. So let us quickly go through what is the problem statement, and then let's start breaking it and solving it. So it is a .NET based web application. As you can see, it uses SQL Server as the database. The version of SQL Server is Enterprise Edition. Why? Because it is also using some reporting, and that's why SSRS is getting used. Okay, fine. Next is, in this application, somewhere in a module, the on-prem AD users get listed for some purpose. You don't need to get into that much detail, but the point is all the users which are there in the on-prem active directory, those need to be listed down in one of the modules. So that is also a requirement. So you need to have a mechanism to fetch the users from on-prem active directory. The user authentication to this particular application, how they will log in, they will not log in using the using application's own authentication mechanism. Rather, it would authenticate with Azure Active Directory, right? So like, for example, there are two methods, right? You can go ahead and within your application in the database, you can keep username and password, and your users can authenticate using that particular password. Or the other thing is, all the user credentials would be stored in some active directory. Now, an active directory could be an on-prem active directory, or it could be an Azure Active Directory as well. So the authentication needs to happen by calling an Azure Active Directory API, and based on that, it would be checked whether a user is a valid user or not. What are meaning whether he's passing right credentials or not. The next is application sends report files. These are like some Excel, complex Excel report files to customers via emails when requested, right? So they will be requesting, and once they request, they will be able to they'll be able to get the report in their email, and this application is going to send it. Now, these are complex reports, and hence some third-party libraries do get used. Okay, it's not just happening using .NET inbuilt libraries, rather some third-party commercial product is being used. So the way it works is probably their DLL or jar files get included. Now, in this case, it is a .NET based application, so their DLLs would be included as part of the project. If it is a Java based thing, their jar files would be included and so on, right? So basically, a third party library is getting used to generate these complex files. Okay, understood. And the last is there's also dependency on some of the on-prem systems like ERP solution, CRM solution, which are running on-prem. And what happens is uh, twice daily, meaning at the interval of 12 hours, so two times daily, the there is certain amount of data which is exported or which is kind of taken from this ERP and CRM system, and that is ingested into the database of our .NET web application. So that also needs to happen twice in a day, and uh, this ERP and CRM is going to be there on-prem only. Only our web application is moving to cloud. Okay. And the last point is the application is this is not a public facing application, meaning the users for this application are all our organization users. So we do not want to expose any component of this application to public, right? Nobody from internet should be able to hit our application and should not be able to do anything. And how are our users going to use it? The organization employees are going to access this application once it is moved onto cloud using VPN connection or direct connect. So that way, the complete connectivity to this application would be private, right? So these are the requirements. Let us try to see that how are we going to solve this. So I'm going to just break this into two slides so that we can write our opinion against each and every point. What all design considerations we have. All right, guys. So now let us try to make points, and based on that, we will define the architecture. Okay, so it is a .NET based web application, and we want to move it to cloud. So we do not want to spend a lot on the redevelopment. So of course we are not going to change the architecture as such, meaning it is running on a Windows server. Even on cloud, we'll go ahead and run it on the Windows server. We will not look at changing the complete architecture, meaning we'll not change it to serverless or something, because if we want to change it to serverless, then it's a kind of complete redevelopment. So one point is sure that we will host it on Windows Server. Okay. The other point is it is currently using database as SQL Server Enterprise Edition. Okay. Now, when we move to cloud, what can we use for database? A very good offering is RDS, Amazon Relational Database Service. The benefits it brings is it will lower down the cost because you don't need a lot of DBAs to do a lot of activities because those are automated, and as such, it's kind of managed service, so you don't have to worry about backups, etc. You can run in multi-AZ format, and it takes care of an instance going down and all such good things. So we can go ahead and use RDS SQL Server, but then there is a challenge there. In RDS SQL Server, you do not get components like SSRS, SSIS, etc. So what do we do then? So one thing is we can go ahead and use SQL Server in infrastructure as service mode, which means we'll go ahead and create an EC2 instance and install SQL Server on that. But then we are not, really saving anything as part of this step. So one thing which we can propose is run run SQL Server on RDS and just redevelop the reports, the reports module again. So, maybe while these are all based on assumptions, guys, right? Now if the application is in such a way that it uses SSRS only heavily, then probably this thing what I'm writing would not make sense. But let's assume that when we discussed, we understood that there were, because this application was developed long back, customer what they had done was They did 2-3 reports using SSRS at that time, but it's not that heavy. So comparing that, we understood that if we go ahead and run SQL Server, normal standard edition, we will save on the license cost as well. Okay, and we will have to just spend some amount, of course, in the redevelopment of the reports module, because the number of reports are very less in number. Okay, so this thing is sorted. Next part is users from on-prem AD get listed in one of the modules of this application. Now, our AD Active Directory is there on-prem, right? And the the number of users which are there in that AD might be changing. New users might get added, it might get deleted. So at any point of time, we want to make sure that the users which exist in the on-prem AD, those users should be listed in our application on cloud. Okay, how will we do that? So currently what happens is, uh, at regular intervals, uh, because the application is on-prem, it is able to connect to Active Directory and it fetches all the user list and populates one of our tables in our application. But once we move it to cloud, how are we going to do that? So we need to have a mechanism through which we can go ahead and connect to our on-prem AD, and we should be able to fetch it, right? Of course, it's not like it keeps happening every minute. That way it is not there. It just happens, like, let's say, twice in a day or things like that. I mean, it could be just some frequency. It could be once in an hour, it could be once in a day, it could be twice in a day, whatever, but it is some frequency on which it happens. So a very cost efficient method which I would propose here is that go ahead and use a lambda function to connect to on-prem AD and retrieve the list of users. It will also insert this list into database on AWS, right? So basically to RDS database on AWS. Now, Lambda function can be scheduled, and we will schedule it. Lambda function can be scheduled using what service? Using CloudWatch events. So you can go ahead and do that. So schedule it based on the requirements. Also, we need to understand that how would your Lambda connect to on-prem AD? In order to establish that connectivity, you require two things, two very important things. First is, of course, there should be VPN or direct connect from your AWS VPC to on-prem. That is, of course, a must. In addition to that, you also need to specify your VPC ID while you are creating the Lambda function. So what would happen with that? There will be an ENI, uh, an ENI will be created in your VPC and it gets connected to your Lambda function, because of which your Lambda gets access to resources inside your VPC. If you have not, if you are not following this part, I highly recommend that you watch our Lambda video. I will also put in the description all the relevant videos which are there related to this scenario, so that if any of these things are not making sense or you have not read it already, you can watch that detailed video and understand those properties of the respective services. So I'll put that complete list in the description. So two important things we want here in the architecture: we need VPN or direct connect, right? VPN or direct connect, we want to establish private connectivity. And the other point is, we also need that there should be VPC ID should be specified uh, while creating Lambda function, right? So these two things. Great, right? So this is okay. Next part is user authentication. Basically, the login process to this application happens via Azure Active Directory. Now, Azure Active Directory is sitting in Azure Cloud. So how can an application reach out to this Azure Active Directory? Of course, it has to call an API which will go via internet. Now, if my EC2 instance Windows EC2 instance where I'm going to host my application, it is also, I need to remember that I need to keep it private, right? Because we have already studied, or we already discussed, that the application is going to be totally private. So it is there in the private subnet. Now from private subnet, if it is to call an Azure AD related API, it has to go via internet. How will it do that? Of course, NAT is required. All right, so we require NAT for sure, right? So NAT gateway or instance, whatever, preferably NAT gateway for production scenario. So we require that to make sure that our instances are able to call the Azure AD related API. Okay, so these are some of the things. Now let's move forward. Um, so here is another requirement. The requirement says that this application sends report files to customers via emails when requested. These are complex reports, and the third-party library is used to generate that complex report whenever a user requests. So now, please understand there is some logic which is there, but you know this report generation is a complex activity, right? As it is understandable from the statement. So it's not necessary that on a button click or whenever user requests, immediately this report will become ready. That won't be the case. So probably it is fetching, information from multiple sources, or basically querying a database, doing some complex joins, and then formatting that, generating a beautiful report using a third-party library. Surely it will take some time. So what happens is customers will request, and after that, within some time, the report gets generated and it will be emailed to them, right? So that's the functionality. Now for this type of thing where you do not where the processing needs to happen based on a particular event, or based on the fact that when a particular requirement comes or an event comes, you can go ahead and do such processing using Lambda surely. So we will just move this part to Lambda to generate the report, because anyway this report generation was written as a separate module, even with the on-prem application, right? So now what we are doing is just taking it, modifying it a bit, and putting it as part of Lambda function, or putting it as a separate Lambda function. Anyway, this thing would not be part of our whole web application, because this gets triggered only when a particular request comes. Okay, so we'll use a Lambda function to generate the report. Okay, because we do not want to allocate computation power for this particular report generation all the time. We don't want to do that. Rather, uh, only when the request comes, only for few minutes at that time we will use that computation power. So that's why we are using Lambda to generate the report. Another thing is, can Lambda include all those third-party libraries? Yes, it is perfectly possible. You can bundle any dependent files as part of your project, while you're deploying your code onto Lambda. So perfectly possible to use the third-party libraries. Okay, so this part is fine. And of course, Lambda will generate the file and do everything, and then it will also store the file on S3. Store the file on S3. Make an entry of that in DB. Make an entry into DB, and then send the email. Of course, all of this it was doing earlier also, just with a small amount of modification in this function. Now we will put it onto Lambda. And why are we storing these files on S3? Of course, because once it is stored on S3, it is cheap and durable. The right. So let us move forward. I think one more point which we should say here is that here also VPC ID should be specified for Lambda, because my Lambda is going to connect to my database, which is inside my VPC, of course. So that's why it is required. So VPC ID should be specified while creating the Lambda function. All right. There's also a dependency on few on-prem systems to ingest some data from these systems at regular intervals, which are twice daily. Now, these systems are not going to move to cloud, of course. So what we want is, because it is only 2 times daily, uh, we need a mechanism through which we can now ingest data from these ERP or CRM systems which are on-prem. Now earlier, what was happening, we had our web application and the ERP system both on-prem. So uh, a code used to run as part of our application, which was connecting to the database of ERP and CRM and was fetching that information. But now web application is moving on to cloud. So I do not want to keep that functionality as part of my web app because it is not going to run 24/7. It is only required twice daily. So again, a Lambda function, same like above. You know, Lambda function, it should have VPC ID. Why? Because Lambda function should have VPC accessibility. Then only it would be able to use the VPN or direct connect to go and connect to go and read the data from on-prem resources, meaning on-prem databases, which are there for CRM and ERP. Okay, so I will show you a diagram also, so you will be clear with it. So I'll just quickly write Lambda function and Lambda function and of course VPC ID should be specified. This application is completely private and no component should be exposed to internet. Understood? So we will keep everything private. Our load balancer, our EC2 instance to run the web application, meaning IIS, our database, everything is going to be in the private subnet, right? So all resources will be in private subnet. Let me just put it here. So all resources in private subnet. So what are we going to keep in public subnet? Only NAT will be there in public subnet, right? That's it. And of course, VPN or direct connect requirement is there. Okay. So these were the points which I took. So with this, if you see, we are not doing a lot of change in the application. Only some of those modules which were kind of independent, but were running on the same machine where our web application was running. I've taken that out and I've put that as part of Lambda, so that of course on the cost gets reduced because I'm not using infrastructure all the time. Also, the web application, the EC2 instance which is running the web application, now I need not keep that unnecessarily big because I've taken away these functionality from that EC2 instance, and EC2 instance would be running only the web application. In terms of database, we are saving cost by moving to RDS SQL Server Standard Edition, and the function, the pressing reason which was there, that we were using SSRS for some couple of reports, we are just gonna go ahead and write that report again, just as a new module as part of our web application. That should not take a long, because those are just very less number of reports. So those are the considerations which we did. We looked at cost, we looked at security in terms of keeping things private. Of course, high availability we will take care, because we will go ahead and run things in 2 AZs. So keeping all this features which we analyzed, or requirements which we analyzed, if we look at the architecture, this is how it will look. So what we are going to do, we have put a VPC, and that VPC is there in a region, let's say North Virginia. Within North Virginia, uh, in our VPC, we have created subnets, and we have divided the subnets in 2 different availability zones. So the blue one is private, and green one is public subnet. Okay, blue one is private. So I've kept one public and one private in AZA, and one public and one private in AZB. We have NAT gateway available. And why we have kept NAT gateway, like 2 NAT gateways in both, following the principle of high availability. Our load balancer is private, in the private subnet, our web server layer, or the layer which is running the uh, IaaS or my web application, that is also private. We are managing it via auto scaling. One important point also which we should do is actually when we are moving it to cloud, we will what we'll do is we will make the application stateless. So store session info in database instead of the EC2 Windows server, web server, let's say. So we will not store in the web server, rather we will start storing it in our database. In case of ASP.NET, it is very simple. You can just go ahead and change a setting in your web config file, and a schema gets created, or basically a database gets created in your SQL Server database, and all the session information will get stored there. If you want, I will leave you the link in the description, which you can go ahead and read further, that how can you do it in your ASP.NET application. So we will do that as well. Why we are doing it? So that our web application or our web servers can be stateless and they can be managed by auto scaling group, so that if a particular server dies also, no problem, new server will come up and take its place, and the connections would not be lost, or the session information would not be lost. We are using RDS, as I explained you, in multi-AZ mode, primary, secondary, all of that is understood. We have got VPN connection between on-prem and cloud. And important thing is we are using S3 for storing files, as I mentioned before, and we are using VPC endpoint, so that my any traffic from my web server which has to go to S3 in order to store the file or retrieve the file should not be happening, should not be going via public, rather it goes in a private manner. And the second and last point is, for all my Lambda function, I would use VPC ID, so respective ENI will get created in my VPC, and Lambda would be able to come and access resources in my on-prem, in my VPC, and then as well as my on-prem resources, because via ENI it will get entry into my VPC, so it can access any private resource here, meaning it can connect to my database and insert something or read something. It is possible. In the same way, my Lambda can connect to the on-prem server as well, provided the firewall is open between on-prem data center and the cloud. The firewall needs to be open. Most of the organizations will have some firewall in their on-prem side, so there you need to open the firewall for the CIDR range of your VPC. You need to open it, and once it is open, your Lambda can go ahead and hit the on-prem Active Directory. It can hit on-prem SAP server, ERP, CRM, anything which you have, that is possible. So that's how you can plan any migration. I try to pick up some of the scenarios which you take, and how do you redesign. As stated in the start of this video, we tried to, in this case, we took a middle path. We did not stick to any one, like do not change anything is one extreme, and completely re-architect the application is the other extreme. But many of the times when you're talking to customer, actually they will not go for both the extremes. They'll say, do something in middle, so that I don't have to spend a lot of money as well, plus I should be able to get as much as possible the good features of cloud. So that's what we have done here. I hope you would have understood, and you will appreciate the time and effort gone in this. If so, yeah, maybe tell somebody about this video, share it with someone, and I'll see you in the next video, where we will be talking more about one such use case. Let us know if you like the series and you would like to hear more such scenarios. Try to write it in detail, that what is that scenario which you would like to cover, right? Which different organizations face, and we will try to include it in our upcoming videos. So with that, we'll tell you bye bye. Take care, keep practicing, keep reading, and we will see you again in the next video.